We forgive ourselves and each other, and we begin again in love. That song is so beautifully in line with our CVUUF covenant, in which we say, forgive the errors and shortcomings of myself and others. We assume good intentions, and we listen deeply to and actively seek resolution. These phrases all speak of forgiveness, of goodwill, and beginning again in love. And with Yom Kippur this week, we honor this season of forgiveness. Since Rosh Hashanah last week and Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, next week, Jewish people have been focusing on reflection and review of the previous year and asking forgiveness directly from those whom they have wronged during the prior year. It's a covenant they have with one another and with God to focus on forgiveness and atonement during this time of year. Now, as I reflected on covenant, I realized I couldn't talk about it without addressing the need for forgiveness for the broken covenant we find between people in this nation and those around the world today. This broken covenant between human beings is hurting us all. The constant violence in words and actions that pit one against another is hurting us. Valuing power over respect is hurting us. The fervent, unquenchable thirst for being right rather than engaging in dialogue is hurting us. It's hurting our children. It's hurting our families. It's hurting our country and our planet. It's a sure symptom of how disconnected we are, how far removed from realizing our common humanity, how distant from the sacredness of life, from the spirit of love, from justice and compassion. So what will it take for humanity to change course? We seem to be at an absolute low right now, a nadir of bigotry, of narcissism, inequality, violence, and destruction of the earth, a deep disconnection. A new dark age where addictive consumerism, raw, unfettered capitalism, and blatant, obvious, bold-faced lies are told with no shame. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. George Orwell just got the decade wrong. And that means our work is urgent, my friends. Our work of building connections, of building bridges, listening, caring, and understanding is vital, especially now. Our work of modeling a more compassionate, loving, and peaceful society is pressing. Our work of raising consciousness about how we impact one another and the planet is imperative. And we have to begin that work in our own communities, right? Microaggressions between one another, self-interest above the community, disrespect or needing to be right are the seeds of disharmony and violence. We need to begin in our families, our homes, our schools, our workplaces, and our local communities. We need to begin right here at CVUUF to heal the wounds we cause one another, to ask for forgiveness and seek reconciliation. We need to remember to value curiosity, kindness, connection, and respect over being right and asserting our power. We need to keep coming back into covenant with each other so that we can build that beautiful city that Joel sang about earlier. So how do we begin shifting our own culture so we can change the world? Our religious identity as Unitarian Universalists is based not on creeds and what you believe, but rather on what we value and how we're in relationship with one another. It's based on what we promise one another and the world. Now, in my family, on our wall above our dining table, we have a picture called Family Rules. And these family rules say, help each other, be thankful, know you are loved, pay with hugs and kisses, which is a great thing, try new things, be happy, show compassion, be grateful, dream big, and respect one another. And of course, laugh out loud. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. And though we didn't create those rules together, we nevertheless feel they express how we want to be together. And that is what covenant is. A covenant is a set of guidelines which holds us together. A covenant is a set of promises, an agreement about the ways in which we want to be in community together as our best selves. A covenant gives us ideals to live up to and shape our role in the world. A covenant gives us scaffolding on which to hang our all too human sloppiness, our mistakes, and our confusion, and try to find some order and a way to come back together. Now, the word covenant in Latin means coming together. And in French, the word convenir literally translates to walking together, which is what we sang about in our joys and sorrows earlier. Covenant also means a solemn agreement or promise. It's a guideline for relationships, a container for communities, a tool for building trust and constancy. But it also helps name specific kinds of things that we're agreeing to, not only generalized principles. Apparently last week, our teens in YRUU debated whether there was even a need for a covenant. Well, I'm hoping that those listening today will understand why it's so important and why we're better off with one than without. Now, the idea of covenant can be traced back to before the biblical era. Covenants were legal oaths of promises between two parties. It was a way to ensure unification of a group beyond blood ties. And that was important. Forming bonds beyond blood, beyond marriage and procreation was the beginning of civilization as we know it now. And the Hebrew Bible illustrates this. When the many disparate clans left Egypt to follow Moses, these people covenanted with one God, or Yahweh, to bind them together. This covenant with a higher power is what united them as Israelites and became the foundation of their laws of being together. Covenants, my friends, have real power. It was a covenant with Abraham and Sarah that prompted the God of Israel to deliver their descendants from bondage and create a nation. It was a covenant between the followers of Jesus that held the first Christians together through persecution. It was a covenant chain that bound together the Iroquois clans. It helped them develop deeper kinship ties and coordinate their action. Promises or commitments among people make a difference in creating intentional futures. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we get our understanding of covenant from the Pilgrims and their desire to form a church bound by agreements rather than ruled by bishops. Puritans in Massachusetts wrote something called the Cambridge Platform in 1648, which was the founding document for how our congregations were to interact. It invited settlers to run the free church in the spirit of mutual love. And it helped them create a collaborative, respectful, shared ministry, independent of the rulers of the Church of England. Members were required and considered it an honor to sign a congregational covenant to be part of the community. So covenant is at the core of our history, at the core of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. Covenant, not creeds. These days, not only are we in covenant with one another in our congregations, but like the Cambridge Platform, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations suggests that we're in covenant with all UU congregations. Ideally, we support one another, and we hold each other accountable to live fully into our faith. But as Unitarian Universalists, we don't impose covenants on one another. Rather, we willingly create them together. We form covenants regularly in our religious education programs, in our classrooms, in our chalice circles, and in our workshops. And we call each other back to covenant when needed. Now, a covenant is not our belief system or creed. Rather, it's an invitation to assume another's goodwill and intention. It makes our coming together in community holy work. It stretches us because it's not always easy. It takes us beyond the randomness of everyday interactions, beyond our moods, our preferences, and neuroses, and supports us with agreements that shape our communications. It means looking for the sacred in one another as much as in ourselves. And I invite you during coffee hour to look for the sacred in all the people you talk to, because everybody is beautiful. A covenant creates a relational center for our community. It's an invitation to live with greater intentionality and integrity. Now, in our society, marriage vows are one of the most common examples of covenant. But I wonder if vows were looked at as a form of covenant rather than vows, whether they might be more realistic and allow for more elasticity in terms of coming back together and trying to live into them. Covenant is different from a contract. It can be broken and inevitably will be broken. But when we fall out of covenant with one another, the hope is that we'll return again and again to restoring our commitments and not just break and leave. Covenant calls us to come back to the table and try again, to begin again in love. The Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams said in his piece From Cage to Covenant that making promises is the right human thing to do. Furthermore, covenants create unity amidst our diversity of belief, amidst our lack of a unifying creed, amidst our wide religious freedom. Others may mock our pluralism, but a covenant is actually a touchstone of unity, of aspiration, and of intention. In his article, Are You a Practicing Unitarian Universalist?, the Reverend Peter Bulata writes, a covenant is more than a contract. It is a moral agreement. We freely enter into this covenant even as doing so requires something of us. And a covenant is based in mutuality. If a person takes and takes but never gives, we're not in right relation. What we are about is relationship. The covenanted relationship of being together in a mutually sustaining way, writes Bulata. But is this all pie in the sky thinking? Are covenants really realistic? How hard is it to adhere to these agreements with one another? It's hard, right? Life is challenging. We all have different ways we respond to stress, different ways we make meaning and varied stories and triggers from our childhoods that inform our behavior as adults. As the German philosopher Martin Buber states, Humans are promise-making, promise-breaking, promise-renewing animals. So it's no surprise that we can make promises to one another and just as soon break them. But the importance of covenant is that we try to repair and renew our promises to one another repeatedly, just as you would in a good partnership. Embedded within a covenant is the understanding that it calls us to be the best we can be, but also the knowledge that we can't always be that. In covenant, we can fall short of our ideals, yet we can make amends and return to who we want to be. And therein lies the deep importance of forgiveness. Can you forgive your minister when they drop one of the many balls they're juggling, or they don't seem to have the time and energy for an issue that you're passionate about? Can we forgive each other for doing the very human thing of failing to live fully into our covenant together? I hope you can. I hope I can. I hope we can, because therein lies growth and a deeper, more fulfilling relationship with one another. Now, quoted in your orders of service, if you take them out and open them up, you'll see a popular covenant by 19th century Unitarian minister James Villa Blake, which a lot of UU congregations speak in their worship every week. Will you speak it with me? This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. There's always a quote at the top of the order of service to reflect upon for the week. Indeed, if we were to have a creed as Unitarian Universalists, it would simply be love. Just do it. It is what our churches were founded upon. 19th century Universalist theologian Hosea Ballou argued for the primacy of love as the foundational covenant of the beloved community. He wrote, "If we agree in love, there is no agreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good." In many ways, our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles are our faith's covenant. Instead of creeds or shared beliefs, our 7 principles unite us around common values. Now, they were developed in a process over 25 years and ratified in their current form in 1985, and you'll also see them in your order of service. But what's so important about our principles and our covenant to our lived reality here at CVUUF? David Augsburger, professor at the Claremont School of Theology, writes, "A group is as healthy as its social contract is clear. A congregation as faithful as its covenant is mutually understood." This beautiful covenant that we all read together earlier was created in 2012 by a group of you, some of you among us now. You wrote it as a way to unite and create a stronger, healthier community. And many of you take this covenant deeply to heart. It's helping us be a stronger, healthier community. Remembering and presencing our covenant regularly increases our congregation's vitality and commitment to one another. And it provides a safe container to which we aspire and can return. And it sends a very clear message to newcomers and others who want to understand more about who we are as a community. In the midst of this insecure world, my friends, we create safety and solidity by knowing where we stand with one another. We aim to provide a safe space of respect, mutuality, kindness, and love. But more than that, attempting to live in right relationship with one another is the best thing that we can do to confront our individualistic, narcissistic, non-committal, violence-ridden society. It's the best thing we can do to model inclusion, compassion, justice, and love. It's the way to lead as Unitarian Universalists. Are you with me? Yes. So I really hope as we begin this new church year that we'll all take the time to refamiliarize ourselves with our CVUUF covenant, as well as with our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles. Bring them up regularly in your groups. Remind each other of what our covenants call us to do, especially when we have disagreements. We will be stronger, happier, and better for it as a community. May this fellowship be a beacon of light for how to transform this disconnected world. May we aspire to be our best, most honest, humble selves in community, committed to the good of the whole. And may we open our hearts to one another, forgive each other regularly, and lead the way with love. Are you up for this? Yes. Are you? Yes. May it be so.